For years, he did everything the court asked of him. Every month, the payments went out on time. He adjusted his life, his budget, and his future around one responsibility he believed was permanent. He never questioned it. He never complained publicly. Then one envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a DNA test result that no one expected, not even him. And in that moment, everything he thought he knew about fatherhood, fairness, and the law was turned upside down. Child support laws exist to protect children, and most parents accept that responsibility without question. Courts rely on trust, paperwork, and assumptions made at the time of birth. In many cases, those assumptions are correct. But sometimes years later, new information comes to light. When biology and legality collide, the emotional damage can be deep, and the legal consequences can be complicated. This story is not about avoiding responsibility. It is about what happens when the truth arrives too late, and how the system responds when reality challenges the past. For many years, his life followed a strict routine built around one responsibility. Every month, on the same date, the child support payment left his account. He never missed it. Not once. It didn't matter if work was slow, if expenses were high, or if his own plans had to be delayed. The payment came first. That obligation shaped his decisions more than anyone around him realized. He chose smaller apartments, drove older cars, and turned down opportunities that would have required moving far away. In his mind, this was what responsibility looked like. He had been told he was a father, and fathers provide. When the court order was first issued years ago, there was no drama. No arguments, no request for a DNA test. At the time, everything seemed clear. He had been in a relationship, a child was born. His name was placed on the paperwork. The system moved quickly, as it often does, because speed is seen as protection for the child. He signed where he was told to sign. He trusted the process, he trusted the adults involved. And most of all, he trusted that the truth had already been established. In the early years, he didn't question much. He wasn't deeply involved in the child's daily life, but that wasn't unusual given the circumstances. He lived separately, saw the child occasionally, and fulfilled his financial duty consistently. People around him praised him for doing the right thing. Friends told him many men would have walked away, but he didn't. That approval reinforced his belief that he was acting honorably. He didn't see himself as a victim or a hero. He simply saw himself as a man doing what was expected. As time passed, the payments became routine, almost automatic. They were no longer tied to emotion. They were numbers on a screen, deductions on a statement. Years went by. The child grew older. His own life moved forward in quiet, limited ways. He never imagined that anything about this situation would change. The case was closed, legally and emotionally, or so he thought. The first doubt did not come suddenly. It arrived slowly through small comments and subtle inconsistencies. A passing remark from someone who knew the mother. A question asked jokingly that landed heavier than expected. At first, he ignored it. Doubt felt disloyal. It felt wrong to question something that had been settled for so long. He pushed the thoughts away and reminded himself that biology didn't matter as much as responsibility, or at least that's what he told himself. But doubt, once introduced, has a way of growing quietly. Over time, he began noticing things he had never paid attention to before. Timelines that didn't quite align. Details that felt off when revisited with fresh eyes. Still, he said nothing. The idea of questioning paternity after so many years felt dangerous. Not just legally, but morally. He didn't want to be seen as someone trying to escape responsibility. He didn't want to hurt a child who had done nothing wrong. The turning point came when circumstances outside his control forced the issue. A medical situation required family history. Questions were asked that could not be answered confidently. The uncertainty that had been living quietly in the background suddenly became unavoidable. This time, ignoring it felt more harmful than addressing it. Requesting a DNA test was not an easy decision. It felt like opening a door that could never be closed again. Once the truth was known, there would be no going back to comfortable assumptions. There would be consequences no matter the result. If the test confirmed paternity, he would carry the weight of his doubt forever. If it did not, everything he had built his life around would collapse. The test was done quietly. No court involvement at first, no legal threats. Just a sample, sent away, and weeks of waiting that felt longer than years. During that time, he continued paying child support as usual. The routine did not stop. But emotionally, he was already somewhere else. He replayed the past in his mind, wondering how many moments had been based on a misunderstanding. When the results arrived, they were clear. There was no ambiguity, no gray area. The words on the page confirmed what he had feared and hoped at the same time. He was not the biological father. The moment did not bring relief, it brought shock. A deep, hollow shock that settled in his chest. His first reaction was not anger. It was disbelief. He read the report again and again, as if the words might change. Years of assumption unraveled in seconds. Every payment, every sacrifice, every choice made around that responsibility suddenly felt disconnected from reality. After the shock came anger. Not explosive anger, but a quiet, burning kind. Anger at the situation. Anger at the system. Anger at himself for never questioning earlier. But that anger had nowhere to go. It couldn't change the past. And it couldn't erase the fact that a child's life had been shaped, in part, by his financial contributions. The legal questions came next. Could the child support order be changed? Could it be stopped? Could the years of payments be recovered? These questions had answers, but none of them were simple. The law does not move easily when it comes to undoing established parentage. In many states, signing a birth certificate or failing to challenge paternity within a certain time frame creates legal fatherhood, regardless of biology. When he brought the DNA results to court, he expected clarity. Instead, he found complexity. The judge did not dispute the science. The results were accepted as factual. But facts alone were not enough to rewrite history. The court had to consider the child's best interest, the length of time that had passed, and the legal decisions already made. The judge explained something that many people don't realize until they are standing in that courtroom. Child support is not about fairness between adults. It is about stability for the child. The system prioritizes continuity over correction. Once a child's life has been structured around a certain legal parent, the law is cautious about removing that support, even if biology tells a different story. This was difficult for him to hear. From his perspective, the truth had finally come out. He felt that truth should matter more than anything else. But the court saw the situation differently. The question was no longer, who is the biological father? The question was, what outcome causes the least disruption to the child? In some ways, this felt like a second betrayal. First by the circumstances that led him here, and now by a system that acknowledged the truth but hesitated to act on it fully. The judge allowed future payments to be reconsidered, but the past was largely untouched. Years of payments were not refunded. Responsibility, once assumed, could not simply be erased. Emotionally, this created a strange conflict. On one hand, he felt disconnected from a role he had legally played for years. On the other, he couldn't ignore the reality that his actions had mattered. The money he paid had supported a child's life. Even if that child was not biologically his, the impact was real. The mother's response added another layer of complexity. She did not deny the DNA results. But she emphasized the stability that had existed for years. She argued that changing everything now would harm the child. The court listened, not because her actions in the past were excused, but because the focus remained on the future. For the man, the hardest part was accepting that there would be no clean ending, no moment where everything made sense again. The truth had changed things, but it had not restored balance. It had simply introduced a new reality that had to be lived with. Over time, he began to understand something painful but important. Responsibility and truth do not always arrive together. Sometimes people do the right thing based on the information they have, and later discover that information was incomplete or wrong. That does not erase the value of what was done, but it does change how it is understood. He also learned that the legal definition of a parent is not the same as the emotional or biological one. The law is built on timelines, signatures, and stability. Biology is built on DNA. Emotion is built on connection. When these three do not align, the results are often uncomfortable and imperfect. As months passed after the court decision, he slowly rebuilt his sense of self. He was no longer just a name on a court order. He was someone who had faced a difficult truth and survived it. He stopped seeing himself purely as a victim and began seeing the situation as a lesson about caution, trust, and the importance of asking questions early. The child at the center of it all continued growing up, shielded as much as possible from the legal and emotional complexity surrounding them. That, more than anything, reminded him why the system was designed the way it was. Flawed, yes, but focused on protecting someone who had no control over how the situation began. Looking back, He wished he had asked for a DNA test at the beginning. Not out of mistrust, but out of clarity. He understood now that asking questions is not the same as avoiding responsibility. It is about making informed decisions that last a lifetime. This experience changed how he viewed fairness. He learned that fairness is not always about equal outcomes. Sometimes it is about minimizing harm, even if that means accepting an imperfect result. The truth mattered, but so did timing. And timing, once missed, cannot be recovered. In the end, the DNA test changed everything, not because it erased the past, but because it forced everyone involved to confront the difference between what was assumed and what was real. It showed how powerful assumptions can be, and how costly they become when left unexamined. And for him, it marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. A chapter defined not by payments or court orders, but by understanding. Understanding that doing the right thing does not always protect you from painful truths. And that sometimes the hardest lessons come long after the decisions are made. In the end, this case reminded many that responsibility and truth do not always arrive at the same time. The law moves forward, not backward, and emotional closure is not guaranteed by legal answers. Some truths bring peace. Others bring new questions. And sometimes, doing the right thing for years does not protect you from the shock of discovering that everything was built on a mistake.